Beijing blinks. Well, as China is a straight pressure, is the United States winning the economic Cold War? Well, after years of tariff battles and tech bans, China shifts tone. But why now? Well, is this a calculated retreat or a silent pivot in a global power struggle? These and many more will be detailed in today's Flash News. Good afternoon and welcome to the Flash News. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. In a sign of mounting pressure from within, China has begun exempting select United States goods from its steep. Now, 125% retaliatory tariffs, an unexpected pivot that highlights growing economic concerns in Beijing. Companies operating in China have been quietly asked to identify essential American imports that should be spared from levies. Is this a genuine step towards de-escalation or simply a tactical maneuver to buy time in a prolonged trade standoff? Well, the exemptions, not yet formally confirmed by Chinese authorities, come on the heels of caution statement from Washington suggesting a desire to stabilize bilateral ties. Beijing's gesture nudges the United States dollar upward and lifted markets in Asia, hinting that both superpowers may be inching towards limited thaw after months of silence and tension. The Politburo, China's top Communist Party body, emphasized domestic stability in its latest policy readout, vowing support for businesses and workers hit hardest by the tariffs. But analysts see a dual message. China is open to dialogue, yet ready to dig in for a long fight if necessary. A Ministry of Commerce task force is already collecting lists from businesses of goods they want excluded from tariffs, showing a calculated response amid pressure on China's manufacturing and supply chains. Meanwhile, United States-based multinationals operating in China, including pharmaceutical giants and aerospace suppliers, have reported that some of their products, like specific drugs and aircraft parts, have already been exempted. A potential list of 131 product categories, including vaccines, chemical, and jet engines, reportedly surfaced on China's social media. Now, though it has not been verified by authorities, wonder if China's selective exemption approach widens cracks in the United States strategy, especially as American industries quietly seek relief amid the election year uncertainty. We see the United States Treasury Secretary giving more insights to this. We'll take a listen quickly.
There's an opportunity for a big deal here, that the U.S. is looking to rebalance to more manufacturing. The identity of that would be less consumption. If China is serious on less dependence on export-led manufacturing growth and a rebalancing toward a domestic economy, I think they use the term dual circulation. Well, right now it's really singular circulation. And if they want to rebalance, let's do it together.
China's outreach to over 80 foreign firms and business chambers only last week reveals a growing desire to ease operational pressures within its borders. American Chamber of Commerce President Michael Hart noted that Chinese authorities are specifically targeting imports that are irreplaceable, a sign that Beijing recognizes its dependency on certain United States goods such as ethane for plastics and patented pharmaceuticals. European businesses echoed similar concerns, with the European Union Chamber of Commerce stating that many of its member companies are severely impacted by the tariffs and they are awaiting official responses to exemption requests.
I'm not going to say, oh, I'm going to play hardball with China. I'm going to play hardball with you, President Xi. No. We're going to be very nice. They're going to be very nice.
Back, I'm live. China still remains firm on its broader position. Despite a $1 trillion trade surplus in 2024, its economy is battling rising unemployment, deflation risk, and a glut of unsold exports, all of which have added urgency to its recent policy recalibration. Now, the United States suppliers of petrochemicals and pharmaceutical drugs remain irreplaceable in many instances, forcing Beijing to choose between ideological defiance and economic pragmatism. Yet, there are limits. Experts caution that energy and agriculture, where alternatives to United States supply exist, may not be included in China's exemptions. The calculus is very different when you have options, noted Alfredo Montufar-Hello of the Conference Board's China Center. Meanwhile, Washington, under rising political and business pressure, has already carved out some exemptions for electronics and other consumer goods. But with 145 tariffs still in place, the underlying deadlock remains intact. While these exemptions could provide much-needed relief for companies on both sides, they are small steps in a complex chess match. Beijing's actions may help stabilize markets and signal openness to negotiation, but they also reflect deep strategic concerns about long-term competitiveness and domestic resilience. Now, is this the start of a cooling phase in the United States-China trade war, or merely a pause before a more intense economic confrontation? Away from the United States tariff, we see that with the Russian-Ukraine war, we see in a stark rejection of the United States, calls for restraint. Russia launched another night of deadly strikes on Ukraine, killing at least 8 people just hours after the United States President Donald Trump publicly urged Vladimir Putin to stop the attacks. Now, the violence underscores the limitation of diplomatic overtures in the war, and in halting the Russians' aggression. We see Moscow sending a signal, as that might be what the entire world believes at this point. Moscow sending a signal that battlefield gains matter more than foreign diplomacy. The attacks carried out via drones and missiles hit multiple regions across Ukraine, including Pavlohgrad, Kherson, Donetsk, Kharkiv, Kyiv. Among the casualties were a child and an elderly woman. In Kherson, we see critical infrastructure and homes that were hit, while in Pavlohgrad, 10 people were injured in a blast that left a neighborhood in ruins. The strikes came just one day before Kyiv endured its deadliest aerial assault since mid-2023, now killing 12 and wounding nearly 90 people. Ukrainian authorities say some of the missiles used, including one that destroyed a residential block in Kyiv, were of North Korean origin, raising fresh questions about international complicity in Russia's weapons supply. Well, Trump's social media plea posted Thursday on Truth Social reflected rising frustration with the lack of a peace settlement. Hours later, the president struck a more optimistic tone, suggesting that both Russia and Ukraine want peace. His special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is expected in Moscow for renewed negotiations. Well, let's take a look at Donald Trump talking about this.
I didn't like last night. I wasn't happy with it. And we're in the midst of talking peace, and missiles were fired. And I was not happy.
We see that Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told CBS News that Moscow is ready to reach a deal, but warned that key points still needs refinement. Meanwhile, the the Kremlin remains tight-lipped on whether it sees Trump's involvement as official or symbolic. Could Trump's shadow policy, diplomacy, be weakening America's united front with its NATO allies, or is it creating an alternate path to peace that traditional channels have failed to offer? This is a critical question we're looking to answer. But peace seems far off. Earlier this week, Trump criticized Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for allegedly blocking negotiations by refusing to recognize Russian control of Crimea. Annexed by Moscow in 2014, Zelensky's stance, however, aligns with Ukraine's constitution and long-standing Western policy that borders cannot be redrawn by force. In what could mark a major shift in the United States foreign policy, diplomatic sources told CNN that the Trump camp has floated a proposal to recognize Crimea as part of Russia, setting off alarm bells among European allies. If implemented, it would undermine a decade of the United States policy and the post-World War II consensus on sovereign borders. The Crimea issue has now become the centerpiece of a widening rift between Trump and Zelensky. Despite asserting that he's been tough on Putin, Trump deflected questions on Thursday about what Russia has conceded in the conflict. Stopping the war, stopping taking the whole country, pretty big concession, he said, without offering further evidence. Well, he added, we're putting a lot of pressure on Russia, and Russia knows that. However, many experts argue that visible military pressure from the United States has waned, and Russia's recent strikes suggest otherwise. But as new attack continues to kill civilians and destabilize Ukraine's energy infrastructure, many are questioning whether diplomacy, especially through unofficial channels, can truly deliver a breakthrough. Will America's push for a peace deal sacrifice long-standing international principles, or can it reshape them to end one of the bloodiest conflicts in Europe since World War II? While away from the war in Ukraine, we see tensions, and we wonder, are India and Pakistan on the brink again? Bloodshed reignites in Kashmir, causing tensions. A deadly militant attack on tourists in the scenic Pahalgam region of Indian-administered Kashmir has triggered a fresh diplomatic crisis between nuclear-armed rivals India and Pakistan, with New Delhi pointing fingers at cross-border linkages and Islamabad pushing back against what it calls baseless accusations. The regional powder keg once again appears close to ignition. We wonder, could this incident mark a dangerous turning point in the fragile Kashmir standoff? Or is this just another round in a long-standing blame game? On Tuesday, suspected militants opened fire on a group of tourists in the Beijing Valley, a popular hill destination near Pahalgam, killing 26 and injuring several others. The attackers reportedly fled into nearby pine forest, sparking a manhunt. Authorities in Indian-administered Kashmir later issued public notices naming 3 suspects, including 2 Pakistani nationals allegedly involved in the attack. Indian intelligence maintains that the strike bears the hallmark of groups with cross-border linkages, a phrase often used to imply Pakistan's involvement. However, India has yet to release concrete evidence supporting this claim. Pakistan, for its part, responded sharply. Officials in Islamabad rejected New Delhi's allegations as frivolous and irrational, accusing India of jumping to conclusions without a proper investigation. They further blamed Indian authorities for failing to protect civilians in a sensitive region already vulnerable to insurgent activity. Is India deflecting from national and international security lapses by turning to its familiar adversary? We wonder in this case, or we wonder on the other hand, is Pakistan really once again playing plausible deniability in a proxy war? While escalating diplomatic warfare in the wake of the violence, both countries have taken a series of retaliatory steps that signal a serious diplomatic freeze. India and Pakistan have shut down the only open land border between them. Both governments have suspended the South Asian visa regime that once allowed limited travel for citizens. They declared each other's defense attaches persona non grata and cut embassy staff members' numbers in both capitals. India suspended the Indus Waters Treaty, a critical pact regulating the shared river system, while Pakistan warned that any move to stop or divert the water would be seen as an act of war and would be met with full force. Our trade relations, already minimal, have now been frozen, including through third-party countries. Pakistan closes airspace to all Indian-owned and operated airlines, a dangerous spiral or a diplomatic reset. While the world watches nervously, analysts note that worrying signs of a deeper, possibly more prolonged fallout. Kashmir has long been the most combustible fault line between Indian nation and Pakistan, and one that has already triggered 3 wars and countless skirmishes. Now, this latest attack, coming amid growing internal unrest and election cycles in both countries, threatens to deepen polarization and increase military alertness along the line of control. Now, coming to the conclusion of the reports this afternoon, but beyond the accusations and counter-accusations, what lies at the heart of this stalemate? With regional diplomacy in tatters, is the subcontinent inching towards another showdown, or could these crises force both nations back to the negotiating table under global pressure? Well, until next time, this is where we'll be drawing the curtains on today's Flash News to a close. Remember, we'll be bringing you recent happenings from the home front. Do have a pleasant day. Until then, I remain Star Smart.